Today, I'd like to talk about speech preparation and the benefits and drawbacks of using different speaking tools like manuscripts, outlines, note cards, or speaking from nothing at all and having a speech memorized. On this scale of preparedness, practice, and polish, down at the bottom we have impromptu speeches. Impromptu speeches have zero preparation, and often the speaker themselves is very unprepared. But these happen in our daily lives all the time. If you're sitting on a Google Meet and your teacher calls on you, that is essentially an impromptu speech. If you're sitting at the Grammys and you're against Taylor Swift, you probably won't win. But what if you do? You'll need an impromptu speech to thank all of your fans for voting for you. At the top of this scale, we have memorized speeches. And memorized speeches have obviously been written ahead of time and thoroughly thought through and practiced for hours on end until they are perfectly memorized. This is not the level that I am holding you to in this class. Let me talk about another type of speaking. In the middle of this scale, we have extemporaneous speaking. Extemporaneous speaking is prepared and practiced, but unlike memorized speaking, it might not be identical. A speaker who memorizes their speech could give the exact same speech, word for word, with the exact same gestures, facial expression, and vocal tone over and over and over again. If I ask an extemporaneous speaker to give the same speech 3 times, they might use some different word choice, or maybe a different example, or their timing might be a little bit different. They might use a different gesture, a different place to pause in their speech. And so they're more willing to be flexible. Extemporaneous speaking doesn't mean that the speaker is unprepared. This speaker has created an outline. They likely are working from a note card. They know approximately what they're going to say, but it's not quite as stringent as a memorized speech. A good place for us to be in this class is between extemporaneous and memorized. I don't expect you to memorize your speeches. However, we do have some shorter speeches that you could probably memorize them. I do expect that your speeches are prepared and practiced and polished and falling somewhere in between this extemporaneous and memorized zone. Now, when we are deciding what to use to help us in our speech, I want us to consider a couple of different methods. One is speaking from a manuscript. A manuscript is a typed or written document that would contain the entire speech, every single word. Let's talk about the benefits and drawbacks of this. Of course, a benefit would be that if you forget what you're about to say when you're speaking, you can just read it. But this class is not public reading, it's public speaking. So I should never see you reading your speech from a manuscript. Some of the drawbacks of manuscripts: if you print your document, it's first of all pretty big, and this blocks a lot of the visual for public speaking. If you are a nervous public speaker and you are holding a manuscript and you are shaking, we can see that pretty obviously as well. Digitally, there are some issues with manuscripts. I could have my manuscript on my other computer, and now I have issues with eye contact. I could place my manuscript on a computer behind my computer, and now for some reason, all of my eye contact is directly above the camera. When I talk about eye contact in an online or digital communication course, your eye contact is when you are looking at the camera, because that is you looking at your audience. So while there are some benefits of having a manuscript, there are also several drawbacks. Now, that being said, some of you are really grounded in your writing, and it does help you to get all of your ideas out. If you want to begin by getting all of your ideas out in a manuscript, that's okay. But I will never want you to turn in a manuscript. For my class, you will turn in outlines, and you will use outlines and note cards when you are delivering your speeches. It will be painfully obvious for those of you who choose to use a manuscript, even though I am warning you against it right now. The second type of preparation or way that you can prepare, this is the one that I heartily endorse, is the use of note cards. So if you have your entire outline worked out, you should be able to organize that into a handful of note cards. Note cards might have words or phrases or symbols that help to remind you what you should be talking about, but they don't contain your speech word for word. When I'm speaking publicly in my classes, I always have my notes jotted down, and I might need to check them every now and again, but for the most part, I really value eye contact and the freedom to use gestures. Even if you are speaking with a note card, you still have one hand free to gesture, and unlike a manuscript, a note card is less likely to shake in a nervous hand. Another reason that note cards are really great is that they require you to rewrite the ideas of your speech. In a typed manuscript, you have typed those ideas once. But if you take that manuscript and then turn it into an outline, you've seen those ideas twice. And if you take that outline and turn it into a note card, you've seen those ideas 3 times. So you're actually giving yourself a form of practice that you might not realize. The third way to speak is, of course, full Dwight without a manuscript or note cards and just go for it and be memorized. Again, I am not asking you to be at this level. However, I do think it's manageable for a couple of our shorter speeches. So if you practice enough and you really have your ideas organized, but practice really is the key to memorization, you might be able to attempt a memorized speech this semester. It's not my expectation, but maybe you want to try it out. Overall, I encourage you to shoot for something between extemporaneous and memorized, and ideally, jot down your ideas on a note card so that it's not distracting to your audience, that your eye contact isn't over your computer or to the side or glued to a piece of paper. I want you to be able to maintain eye contact with your audience. And when you need to glance down and check your notes, that's not a big deal. I'm not expecting a memorized speech.